Poeltl is back. The Raptors got smoked by the Pistons. It's the All-Star break. Let's go to the film room.
The only thing that's originally filmed is that and I've studied older films and tried to figure out how I got that impression. I always get amazed when I'm in the cutting room.
The unique thing about film is an art form
exactly.
is the editing.
All right, folks, so Jakob Poeltl returned to the lineup for the first time in 24 games. He played 20 minutes, dropped 9 points and 6 rebounds. The good thing is that he played, and it didn't seem like he got hurt in this game. Post-game, he told us, the media, that he felt pretty good. So all of those are good signs leading into the All-Star break for the Raptors and for Jakob Poeltl. Let's break down some of his game. All right, so bread and butter stuff for Jakob Poeltl is working in this area of the floor where he can be a playmaker and he can be a dribble handoff hub for the Raptors. So here, he runs a pick and roll with RJ Barrett. Barrett and him have an elite connection. This is bread and butter for the Raptors, and he finishes in the traffic. Now, a stagger screen play for Emmanuel Quickly where boom, boom, 2 screens being set for him. As you see, he rejects the screen, and that creates a rolling opportunity for Jakob Poeltl, wide open to the basket, and he finishes. Thought he looked really good in the second half of this game in a stint. At least mobility-wise, he looked much better in the second half. Here, off of the Scottie Barnes miss, he crashes the offensive glass and tips it in. And again, I thought in the first half he looked a little slow running the floor, but in the second half he looked much better. As you see here, he runs the floor. Good connection with Scottie Barnes here, who finds him on the cut and the finish. But at the same time, you can see that his burst isn't necessarily there, or his lift isn't there, or where you would like it. Here he gets blocked by Asar Thompson, and if we run that back, look, he doesn't even get that high off the ground. Here they run, high post action for him to be able to get downhill, and yeah, he doesn't get that much lift off the ground here against B-Ball Paul. And so those are the areas where you hope he gets a little bit better. Very similar situation here where he grabs the offensive rebound, but doesn't get enough lift and gets blocked by B-Ball Paul, who absolutely dominated the Raptors tonight. As we welcome you inside the film room, folks, it was a bad game for the Toronto Raptors. They got absolutely smoked by the Detroit Pistons. 113-95 is the final score. Cade Cunningham dropped 28 points, 7 rebounds, and 9 assists. Paul Reed, there was no Isaiah Stewart. There was no Jalen Duren as they're dealing with suspensions after a fight broke out against the Hornets. But Paul Reed dropped 22 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists on 17 shots. He was awesome in this game, especially in the first quarter. I believe he had 17 of his 22 points in the first quarter. He absolutely dominated the Raptors in the opening frame. And I've liked Paul Reed for a while. I thought he would have been a good trade target for the Raptors. I thought he made sense for what they require from that position. Wasn't getting a lot of playing time for Detroit anyways because they have, Stewart and Duren there to fill those roles. Ultimately, he was awesome in this game. He was genuinely incredible, and it's cool to see him shine. Regardless, this was a game where the Pistons took command very early and never let go of the rope. And they did so without their 2 main centers, which goes to show you, one, the Pistons are a very good basketball team, and they have been all season. They are now the second team in the NBA to win 40 games before losing 20 games. And if that matters to you at all, just a little bit of context. I'll get into the Raptors stuff in a second, but just a little bit of context. 90% of teams in the modern era to win 40 games before, actually I should rephrase that. 90% of NBA champions in the modern era, and by modern era I mean post-2000, have won 40 games before losing 20 games. And the only teams to do that so far are the Detroit Pistons and the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Spurs have a chance to do it still. The Celtics have a chance to do it still. And so there's still some opportunity here. Now, ultimately, is that the be-all and end-all? No, but it's something to show you just how good this Detroit Pistons team is and how good of a process they have, even when they're missing players, to play the exact style that they have all season to which they dominate. That style is one, being an incredible interior presence. They dropped 50 points in the paint tonight compared to the Raptors' 34. They had 17 offensive rebounds compared to the Raptors' 11. The Raptors had 38 rebounds in this game. The Pistons had 63. So physicality, clearly something that was an advantage for the Detroit Pistons. And if you've been listening to this show for any amount of time, you guys will have heard me talk about the fact that I think the Pistons are at the very least an interesting matchup for the Toronto Raptors because they share similar traits. They both play physically. They both are defensive-oriented teams. They both use their size to their advantage. They both are not that great of a three-point shooting team. And tonight, the Raptors got outmatched by a team that does what they do better. And admittedly, they had a good shooting night tonight as well. 14 of 34 from three. They shot 40%. You know, they've shot 40%, I think, 15 games this season. So this was an outlier shooting performance from the Detroit Pistons, but they met all of their other benchmarks, if you will, in terms of their points in the paint, the rebounding, etc. It's exactly how the Pistons have won 40 games before losing 20 games this season. Pistons team is very good. This Raptors team, not as good as the Detroit Pistons right now. And truthfully, they have come up against a lot of these top-tier teams in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference, and they've come up short. They are now 1-10 against the top 6 teams in the NBA. Top 6 teams means top 3 teams in each conference. So the Detroit Pistons, the Boston Celtics, the New York Knicks, the Oklahoma City Thunder, San Antonio Spurs, and Houston Rockets. They have struggled against those teams. And if you were to extrapolate that out to the top 4 teams in each conference, obviously they've beat the Cavs a few times this season, I believe 3 times this season. And they lost to the Nuggets once. But overall, if you look at it, they have struggled against the good teams in the NBA. Why? You know, there's a bunch of things that we can point to here, but I want to pull up some stats that I think are interesting here. So against those teams, against the top 6 teams in the NBA, the Raptors have the 25th offense in the NBA and the 26th defense in the NBA. The offense, you could say, that's understandable. This Raptors team has struggled all year, not all year, but overall, the Raptors have struggled on offense. They are about 19th last time I checked. They're hovering around, you know, below the middle tier of NBA teams offensively. And their half-court offense has been pretty bad, especially over the last couple of months as teams have figured it out. More zone they're seeing. More loading up on Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes. The Raptors shooting really is making them struggle in these half-court scenarios, not being able to capitalize on the advantages that Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes are able to create in the mid-post area. And it's worth mentioning, Brandon Ingram only took 7 shots tonight. And you look at that and you're like, what the heck? What happened there? The reason that happened was because, and by the way, he had 0 assists. So there's 2 things happening here. One, the Pistons loaded up. They pre-switched a lot of actions for Brandon Ingram off of the ball. And so many times, instead of BI being able to catch and shoot or catch and go, it was a switch already. It was a preordained switch. And because the Pistons have length all around between Cade Cunningham and Asar Thompson and Tobias Harris, they were comfortable in those situations. And if Brandon Ingram did find an advantage, teams would load up on him. The Pistons loaded up on him. If Brandon Ingram made the pass, which I think he did most of the time, the Raptors did not make their shots. And that has been something that has been prevalent over the last couple of months for the Toronto Raptors, where BI will create an advantage. The Raptors will not capitalize on that advantage. They won't hit their shots. And that's why his assist numbers are lower than they have been recently for him or in his career in general. I think the same thing applied to Scotty Barnes, although Scotty had a little bit better of a game. I think overall, no one on this Raptors team was able to carve out any legitimate advantage offensively against a very good defense in the Detroit Pistons. And as I go back to that number, 25th on offense versus the top 6 teams in the NBA, that completely makes sense to me. This Raptors team doesn't have the shooting to be able to take advantage of the advantages their star players create. And at the same time, I don't necessarily think they can outmatch other teams physically to the degree at which they need to outmatch teams physically in order to carve out that advantage that they're looking for on the interior. Here's another stat for you. The Raptors are 27-9 this season when they win the points in the paint battle, which means they scored more points in the paint than their opponent. When they do that, they're 27-9. Elite team when they win on the inside. When they lose that battle, they are 4-10. They get cooked. After tonight, they're 4-11. So ultimately, this team is one-track minded offensively. When they aren't able to impose themselves on the inside, when they aren't hitting the tough shots that Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes are required to hit, it becomes a little hard for this team to figure out how to score against the very, very best. And they didn't get much from their bench tonight either. You know, their bench overall, I would say, has been a bright spot for them this season between Jamal Shead and Mamu and getting these spark contributions from Colin Murray-Boyles, of course, who didn't play tonight. But overall, it's not as reliable as you'd like. And these other teams are just deeper. They have more options to go to, and they have more reliable offensive options. And the fact that the Raptors bench can't hit their three-point shots is really killing them too. Like, not being able to convert on those opportunities in these transitional lineups is really tough. Tonight, the Raptors did try a few transitional lineups. It was Jakob Poeltl, RJ Barrett, and Emmanuel Quickley together, and it was Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes together. And that makes sense completely to me because IQ and RJ are reliant on a big man who can screen for them and create advantages, and Scotty and BI can uplift lineups in a major way. And so you hope that Yak's presence will be able to allow IQ and RJ to get going offensively, and that trio can play together while Scotty and BI are off the floor. That being said, it requires a Jakob Poeltl to be what Yak was last year. And right now he isn't that. You know, you got him for 20 minutes tonight. I thought he looked truthfully, he looked stiff. And I don't mean to judge him off of, 20 minutes of action. And it's tough because he's coming back after 23 games missed. The fact that he played, in my opinion, is a good sign and a positive thing moving forward. But how does he look for the final stretch of the NBA season? I think that will be the biggest factor for this Raptors team that has the 9th hardest schedule for the remainder of their games. I think it's crucial to the Raptors staying in the top 6, maybe vying for a home court advantage in the playoffs, or falling out of the top 6 entirely and being a play-in team. How effective Jakob Poeltl is in the minutes that they play him will be crucial. Not only because they will play him and he needs to be effective in those minutes, but because this impacts Colin Murray-Boyles and the minutes that he plays. This impacts their lineups with Mamu and Shed and kind of the roles that those guys all play on any given night. It's very important for Jakob to play positively over this final stretch and not be a hindrance to what the Raptors found out without him, what they developed without him. Anyways, so that to me all makes sense. The fact that the Raptors struggle against the very best teams in the NBA, the fact that they can't score against the best teams in the NBA, the fact that they are very reliant on points in the paint and dominating on the inside to beat good teams and any team really in the NBA. All of that makes sense to me. What that means for them moving forward, it's hard to put too much into the final stretch of the season. Because at this point, truthfully, folks, you kind of are who you are, And while there will be big turnarounds in this final stretch post All-Star break, there will be teams that go, 15-5 or 20-5 in this final stretch, and you're like, wow, this looks like a contender. I think the Cavs have an opportunity to do that with James Harden and Donovan Mitchell. They also have a very easy schedule, and so I could see the Cavs catapulting up the Eastern Conference standings. That being said, most of these teams kind of know who they are at this point. And the Raptors, at this point, are a good team. They're not a great team. And I think that's okay for this stage that they're at right now. So much of the conversation is about rushing this team to be what they are or what they might be. And I think you need to play the patient approach a little bit because ultimately you want to see what this team can be in the playoffs and what they lack. Now, me and you can go back and forth and say, well, we clearly can tell what they lack. It's shooting, it's offensive creation, it's someone who's able to reliably knock down a shot or create a shot outside of Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes. Those two need help. I think we can both agree on that. That being said, you need to see how it looks in a postseason setting, because what exactly do Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes require? And how much will Jakob Poeltl's presence impact how the quality of their looks are offensively, and also how much better they can be defensively? So those are the questions that I think the Raptors are asking themselves as they head into the final, 25, 30 games of the season. One, how much better is this team when Jakob Poeltl plays? Two, can Jakob Poeltl get back to what he was before? And three, if we are healthy, how much can we really push some of these better teams in our conference? And if the answer is we can't push them that well right now, then the summer will require a reevaluation in a major way. If you push a team in the Eastern Conference, if you face the Cavs and you force them to 7, or you end up winning a first-round series or something along the lines of that, you can be a little bit more confident in the current version of this group moving forward. Maybe you make some tweaks here and there. Maybe you make a trade of some sorts to give you more assurance in the center spot or the guard spot. But overall, you're looking at like, okay, this foundationally works. Right now, the Raptors want to see if their blueprint works. And I think it has worked to a degree. They are a top 6 team in their conference for a reason, but they naturally have to assess it against the best of the best. That's what it takes in the NBA to win. And right now, the Raptors, I think from an evaluation standpoint, can look at themselves and say that they aren't one of the best teams in the NBA. They are a good team, but not great. And I think that's okay for them at this stage of the life cycle, at this stage of team building. What comes next is very intriguing when it's the summer, when it's the offseason, when it's free agency, when it's time for trades, when it's time for the 2026 NBA draft. All of those things play a factor into how this team either rises up to the top of the Eastern Conference or stays middle of the pack. That's the very intriguing part for this Raptors team. The easy part is done. Building a good team, in my opinion, in the NBA is relatively easy. You look at the Utah Jazz, you look at the Washington Wizards, who are trading for these stars to be good teams. It's really hard to become the Oklahoma City Thunder or the San Antonio Spurs or the Denver Nuggets or the New York Knicks or the Boston Celtics or the Detroit Pistons. Very hard to be those teams. What do those teams all have in common? Truthfully, I think it's winning around the margins continuously. But at the same time, I think it's an understanding of what their stars require. The Pistons took their leap, and I'll wrap this up in a second. The Pistons took their leap with Cade Cunningham because they realized, one, Cade needs shooting, Cade needs defense, Cade needs a rim runner. And that's exactly what they filled their roster with. It's shooting in Tobias Harris and Duncan Robinson and now Kevin Huerter. It's lob threats, etc. The Boston Celtics said, okay, what do Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown need? They need 5-out spacing, they need shooting, and they need other good guard defenders. What did they get? Derek White, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford. Now that team has changed, obviously, and we'll see how that looks. They've changed their philosophy a little bit, but for the most part, that won them a championship. What do Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns require? Okay, well, they need wing defenders, they need shooting, they need spacing, and you could have your gripes about how good of a team the Knicks truly are, but ultimately, they went out and tried to alleviate that with OG Anunoby and Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges, and they're trying to fill their gaps that way. The Denver Nuggets, what does Nikola Jokic need? Nikola Jokic needs shooting. He needs offensive creation around him. How many times have I just said shooting? And truthfully, it's not like the Pistons are a good shooting team. They're 22nd in three-point percentage. They're near the bottom of the league in three-point attempts. The Nuggets don't take a lot of threes either, but they have guys who can convert them. The Oklahoma City Thunder don't take a lot of threes, but they have guys who can convert them. So overall, I think it's just an element of shot creation and finding out what your stars need. And if you're building a team around Scottie Barnes and Brandon Ingram, I think all of the data is pointing towards what kind of players you need on your team. Anyways, folks, that's it. That's all I got. Enjoy your All-Star break. It should be a very, very good time for the Toronto Raptors. A time to truthfully celebrate how good they've been to start this year. Scottie Barnes is an All-Star. Brandon Ingram is an All-Star. Darko Rajakovic and his coaching staff is an All-Star. Colin Murray-Boyles and Elijah Martin are rising stars. A.J. Lawson is a G League All-Star. It's all good for the Toronto Raptors right now. They have won. They have won at a pretty good level, and they're getting rewarded for it at this All-Star weekend. So enjoy that weekend. Enjoy the festivities. We'll be back for Chicago on Thursday. Appreciate you guys as always. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. See you guys in a week. Peace.